When the ANC took power in 1994, they immediately established an iron grip on the power and began to enrich themselves by plundering the nation they had vowed to serve. And they've continued to betray and plunder the nation for almost 25 years. But many black South Africans now understand that this useless and corrupt organization cares nothing for them and can never ever lead them to the golden future that seemed possible in 1994 and should still be possible. But many whites were aware that given enough rope, the ANC would eventually hang itself. And now in January 2018, they finally have enough rope. The ANC has trashed everything they have touched for the past 24 years. For example, our international financial standing is now junk. They have trashed Eskom, they've trashed South African Airways, the SABC, our national health, our education department, they've trashed the police, and they have inflicted unlimited corruption on us and anything else one cares to mention. And there are also some smaller but equally infuriating things related to the ANC, such as charging a farmer with manslaughter after he shot and killed farm invaders. And recently a lady was sentenced to 3 years of prison for losing her temper and using racist language after having been mugged by blacks. The list goes on. And then there is their utter lack of concern regarding the murder and mayhem on our farms, and their intention to help themselves to private property without compensation. Surely, if all this uncivilized conduct is allowed to continue, then we have only ourselves to blame if it deteriorates into unbridled savagery and bloodshed. But let's consider for a moment that since the ANC has trashed and corrupted every national institution, it follows that they must have done the same thing to the military as well. And if this is so, it represents a golden opportunity for the Afrikaners to become the major armed force in the nation. It would then become impossible for the more bloodthirsty lunatics in our country to carry out their threats of murder and mayhem. So with our superior organizational ability, Afrikaners and Jews could rapidly assemble armed power that the ANC would be completely unable to match. And they would be left helpless and ridiculous before the entire nation. And our alliance would then make it clear that we have no ambitions to regain power, but our intention is to keep the country stable, while making every effort to help our black compatriots to establish the sort of government they've always wanted and needed, with godly, decent, and patriotic people of their own choice who can succeed brilliantly, unlike the detestable ANC. And furthermore, if we think and act in this way, we'll be able to explain to the world what we're doing, and the leftists will not be able to portray us in a bad light, as they will certainly try to do. Furthermore, it will soon become clear to black South Africans that our goal is not to regain power, but to help them to build a great and glorious African nation at the southern tip of the continent. A nation that will strengthen and inspire the whole of Africa. And if we can achieve this, then black South Africans themselves will become part of our democratic military force and eventually take it over altogether and make it into a really high-quality national defense force of their own. The struggle in South Africa is not about black versus white. It's about civilization versus leftist damnation. It is, in fact, the beginning of the great struggle that the Bible calls Armageddon. And if we understand the biblical nature of humanity's current situation, then we're already halfway to the successful outcome promised by the giants of Scripture. Now, if you look at these two pictures of Afrikaans and Israeli troops, it clearly shows that these two nations are capable of purpose and dignity. And it is clearly our duty to lead the world struggle for godly civilization against the destruction of the whole world at the hands of the left. The ANC decision to expropriate property without compensation is a typical leftist act, no different from their 20 years of leftist acts that have all but destroyed the high hopes of their people. Actually, Afrikaners and Jews stand at the crossroads of human destiny, and our alliance concerns far more than the future of South Africa. This alliance is the beginning of the biblical events described by both Moses and Jesus, whereby the Jewish people reclaim the broken covenant of Sinai from the grip of the Pharisee rabbinate, where it has remained for 2,000 years, to the very great cost of the Jewish people. And also, if the Afrikaners can become an inspiration to their African compatriots, then they will have succeeded in building the church promised before the Battle of Blood River. The struggling Judeo Christian world is desperate for hope and leadership. And if we step forward with that leadership, we'll be astounded at the strength of the support we will receive. Forget about the United Nations and all the useless and corrupt world councils. And forget about the rubbish known as international law. Just concentrate on God and duty, and all will be well. And while you're about it, get yourself a copy of God versus the Left, which book is all about the fall of the Jewish people 2,000 years ago, and the glorious recovery that awaits both Jews and Christians, as long as we understand our duty and as long as we do it. So this is Paul Kaplan signing out and thanking you for your time and attention.